Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at Temple Beth Israel. And those of us who are joining us through YouTube, Facebook, J-Air, it is just amazing to have so many people this morning be with us in person as well as online. This is a beautiful Shabbat as we start heading towards Pesach. It is Shabbat HaChodesh, which is one of the special Shabbatot before Pesach. It's also Mevarachim Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh Nisan begins tomorrow night. And I know every woman at Temple Beth Israel is coming to Rosh Chodesh tomorrow night, or those who identify as women, you're also welcome to come along. And so as we celebrate Rosh Chodesh, coming up, as it is Shabbat HaChodesh, there's a different Haftarah. We have 2 Sifrei Torah this morning, different readings. And of course, the reading as we do for Rosh Chodesh will be the alignment of the sun and the moon and the stars from Genesis. That was a choice that was made by the progressive movement quite a few years ago. I think Rabbi Morgan was part of that, to rather read about the sun and the moon and the stars from creation as opposed to sacrifices. Which one would you prefer, sacrifices or happy sun and moon and stars? Happy sun and moon and stars. I agree with that as well. Let us now continue with the blessing for our bodies. We are on page 194. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatza et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvara'avo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im yipateach echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להיקיים ולעמוד לפניך. ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. אלוהי נשמה on page 196. שמו שבידו נפש כל חי ורוח כל בשר איש. And we continue with the blessing for the daily miracles on page 198. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir hasurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten leyaef koach. Amen. Baruch אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים בסלם אלוהים.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bat chorim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשה
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, oseh Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So here's a fun fact for everybody. Or let me just ask you a true or false question, and that'll lead into the fun fact. Does that work? Yeah, just say yes. I just need everybody to agree with me today. Is the blessing for Torah study, which we chant as part of the Nisim B'chol Yom, is it or is it not part of the Nisim B'chol Yom? What do you think? Who says no? Those of you online can respond. Victor's managing the chat. By the way, Victor, you don't have to be on the chat all the time. So let us know, is it part of the daily miracles? Is Torah part of the daily miracles? Is the Torah blessing? I'm putting some extra information in here, or not? What are your thoughts? Yes? No? It is not, in fact, part of the Nisim B'chol Yom. For those of you who just kept quiet because you weren't sure, that's always a safe bet. So then, should we or should we not have the same chant for it? Should we chant it or should we stop after Oter Yisrael B'tifra, Amen? And now we continue with the blessing for Torah study as we engage in the work of Torah. Or do we just do what we've been doing? We should stop, should we not? Technically, but why don't we stop? Because we just love singing. You love singing, me not so much. You love singing. So we generally should stop to make that difference, which is why you'll often hear me and others say, as we've just completed the blessing for Torah study, not we've just completed the blessing for our daily miracles. And then we continue just to make that separation, to make that difference. So that's a fun little Torah fact, Siddur fact for you. So let's continue with now doing the work of Torah, although you could make the argument that that was the work of Torah, to learn a little bit about the service. Glenda and David, you're looking at me as if I've lost it this Shabbat. So please join with me in the middle of page 204. V'harevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratacha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael v'nihiyeh anachnu v'tze'etzaenu v'tze'etza'ei amcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. And of course, one of my favorite readings on page 206, since we are a cappella today, it works better to read as opposed to try to sing the melody for Elu Devarim. So let's share in this together, this blessing. These are the obligations without measure, which enhance our world whilst building credit in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. And the study of Torah encompasses them all. Let us now close our Nisim B'chol Yom, our Birkat HaShachar, the morning blessings, as we head to Pesukei de Zimra, verses of praise, on page 212.
Baruch she'amar v'haya
Baruch Hu.
Baruch Ose Bereshit.
Baruch Mose ve'oseh.
Baruch Gozer Umkayem.
Baruch merachem al haaretz.
Baruch Merchem HaBeriot.
Baruch meshalem sachar tov lihireyav.
Baruch Chai Ha'ad. V'kayam Lanetzach.
Baruch podeh umatzil. Baruch Shemo. Bishvachot uzmirot negadelecha, uneshebechecha, unefa'erecha, v'nazkir shimcha, v'namlichecha malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid chei haolamim, melech meshubach umafa'ar adayad shemo hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal batish ba'achot. Sharon, just before we move into Psalm 92 on page 214, can you just double check that your mic is on? It is on. Thank you. So Mizmor Shir, Psalm 92.
Mizmor Shir.
And so we turn to Ashrei on page 215.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha.
Hello, Ashrei Ham Shadonai Elohav.
Tehillah LeDavid. Ve'higdalato ein cheker.
Dor ledor Yishabach Maasecha, וגבורתך יגידו.
חזק כבוד הודיך, ודברי נפלאותיך השיחה.
ועזוז נורתך יאמרו, וגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר רב שובך יביעו, וצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדל חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו בכל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וקורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד האדם מלכותו.
מלכות המלכות כל עמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הכפופים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסדרו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראוהו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר אדוני כל אוהביו, ואת כל השעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך עוד עשה שם קודשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Sharon, just before you sing Psalm 150, Victor, if you could let everybody know that Gersh is working on the sound, that it will hopefully come back up, and we apologize, and hopefully, they can lip sync. Not lip sync, lip read, but probably not, because sometimes it's a bit far. So Psalm 150, page 218.
Hallelujah,
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, El B'Kodsho. Because then you block each other off. Alright, it's alright. It's not her mic. You don't need to call. And so let us move forward to page 223 as we close up Pesukei de Zimra, the verses of praise, with one last praise for this section. Yishtabach Shimcha la'ad malkeinu, hayal hamelech hagadol v'akadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמרה, עוז הממשלה, נצח, גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודאות, מעתה ועד עולם. And the closing blessing, the Chatima, Baruch atah Adonai, El Melech Gadol Batishbachot, El Haodaot, Adon Haniflaot, Habocher B'Shirei Zimra, Melech Elchei Ha'olamim. We rise for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 224. We'll just wait for Sharon to get mic'd.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
והעמד יברהירותה וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביומכון ובחייתכו בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, והגמוע מהמיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתגל, שמי לקודשה
בריחו
וגם מן כל בחטא ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
As we are seated, we continue with the blessing for creation of the day on page 228. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or v'rei choshech, oseh shalom v'rei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha brachamim, uvtuvo machadesh b'chol yom, tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, malah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titzbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, va'al morei or she'asita yafarucha selah. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'oro. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ham-orot. On page 231. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light blinded we saw, that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke, and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us. As we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai habocher ba'amo Yisrael ba'ahava.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Baruch Shem kevod malchuto leolam va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר חנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לפניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך, בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. ויאמר אדוני למשה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו הציצית הכנף בתרתי חרת, והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
On page 238. True is this eternal teaching to us, beloved and precious, awesome, beautiful and good. The God of the universe is truly our sovereign, the rock of Jacob, our protecting shield. O God, you endure through all generations. Your name persists, your throne is firm. Your sovereignty and faithfulness last forever. Your words live and endure, faithful and precious for eternity. From Egypt you redeemed us, freeing us from bondage. For that your beloved sang praise, exalting you. Your dear ones offered hymns, songs, praise, blessings, and thanksgiving to you as sovereign, the living and enduring God, high and exalted, great and awesome. God ever humbles the proud, raises the lowly, frees the imprisoned, redeems the afflicted, helps the oppressed, answering our people when we cry out. God, praise to God Most High, blessed is God and deserving of blessing. And in great joy, Moses, Miriam, and Israel responded with song to you, all of them proclaiming truly the song of freedom, Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha vayrim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar bakodesh, nora dirot o sefere, nora dirot o sefere, shira chadasha shibechu gehurim, לשמחה על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמלכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ים בבם בים ביביבם, ים בבם בים בם, ים בבם בים ביביבם, ים בבם בים בם, איי 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 איי, ים בבם בים בם, איי 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 איי, ים בבם בים בם. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי חינומך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Amen. We're now going to continue with the Amidah on page 240. 42, and I think everybody's familiar with our custom of reciting the first 3 blessings out loud together, standing, and then of course we'll continue seated with the rest of the prayers. Page 242.
Adonai שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, עליון, גומר חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לפני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך חוזה ומשיח ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, בחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל. מחכה חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו כשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומיתו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומשמיח ישוע, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, בחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב ביד נביאך, וכרזה זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו אדיר אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו, ברחמיו קדושתך נקדיש, בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Amen. As we are seated, we continue with Yismachu on page 250.
ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שביעי שבת, כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת. חמדת ימים אותו קראת השבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת, זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת.
Amen. And Kedushat Hayom continues on page 252. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ritzei v'imnuchatenu, kadshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chalkenu b'toratecha, sabeinu mitzuvecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'taher libenu le'ovdecha be'emet, v'anchilenu Adonai Eloheinu ba'ava v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael mekadshei shemecha, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. We continue with Ritzei on page 254.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel u'tehi leratzon tamid avodat Yisrael. Yisrael amecha karov lecho koreav b'nei rabatecha v'chonenu shefuch ruach נשוב בחג ציון. ברחמים. ברוך אתה אדוני ומחזיר שכינתו לציון, 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 לציון.
And our hoda'ah, our prayer of thanksgiving on page 256. Modim anachnu lach. She'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzurum chayenu magen yishenu atahu l'dor v'dor. Nodeh lecha u'nesaper tehilatecha al chayenu hamsurim beyadecha va'al nishmotenu hapkudot lach ve'al nisecha shebachol yom imanu va'al niflotecha v'tovotecha shebachol eit erev v'voker v'toharayim. Hatov kilu chalu rachamecha hamrachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'alam kivinu lach. V'al kulam yitzbarach v'itramam shimcha malkenu tamid le'olam va'ed. V'chol hachayim yaducha sela v'yalalu et shimcha be'emet ha'el yeshuatenu ve'ezratenu sela. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha u'lacha na'eh lahodot. A song of prayer of peace on page 258.
שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, והכל ישראל, והכל ישראל עמך, ברכינו אבינו כולנו כאחד, באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, והכל ישראל, והכל ישראל עמך, תורת חיים וחוות חסד, ואהבת חסד, וצדקה וברכה, ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, והכל ישראל, והכל ישראל עמך, וטוב וטוב בעיניך, לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה, בשלומך. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, והכל ישראל, והכל ישראל עמך, ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Let us take a few moments now for the prayers of our hearts, meditations. We may find inspiration on page 260 or 261.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Val Kol Yoshvei Tevel, may God bring peace to the entire world, and we say, Amen. Friends, we now turn to Seder Kriyat Torah LeShabbat, with the reading of Torah for this Shabbat. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the service, it is a special Shabbat where we have two Sifrei Torah, which will be carried this morning by Robert and by John. And of course, that means the one section, as I mentioned earlier, comes from Bereshit, and the other one is from Exodus. And of course, we now complete the cycle of Torah reading for the book of Exodus. And this afternoon, technically, and through the weekend next Shabbat, we'll begin the book of Leviticus. I'm sure that that is everybody's favorite section of the Torah. With all the laws, with all the sacrifices that happen, it certainly keeps us on our toes in terms of looking for interpretation. And we'll also be announcing the new moon, which starts tomorrow night, and that's what we'll do. That'll be done as part of the prayers for country and for Israel. Let us rise. We're on page 362.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אב הרחמים, היטיב ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים. כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך ערם ונישא, אדון עולמים. ויהי בנסוח הארון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני, ויפוצו אויביך, וינוסו משנאיך מפניך. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
just a reminder as the Torahs start coming around that because of COVID, we're not leaning forward to kiss the Torah, we just bow gently.
לך אדוני הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד כי כה בשמיים בשמיים ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנצח לכל ראש לך אדוני הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד כי כה בשמיים בשמיים ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנשא לכל ראש רוממו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו והשתחוו לקודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Shabbat Shalom. Hope you're feeling strong because I'm going to give my drush now and it could be a while, Robert. It's good to be back, isn't it? Isn't it? So the parsha this Shabbat Vayakhel Pekudei, as many of you would have known if you went to Torah study this morning to Parshat Shavua with Rabbi Lazaro, you know it's a double Torah portion. And of course, Pekudei, and each of these sections are actually quite small because they just are. And in looking at, where do we choose to read, how do we choose to read it, which haftarah do we use, of course, is all impacted by the cycle of Torah reading, which we do. As you know, we're in the triennial, and we're in the second of the three sections. And the haftarah this morning, we won't be reading the haftarah this afternoon. It will be this morning, I promise. We won't go that long. It comes from Ezekiel, and it's part of the Shabbat HaChodesh Torah reading. So things move and things shift and as how the calendar works. And what I want to share with you, just a couple of notes, a couple of remarks about the Torah portion. And this whole concept of the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan. And, then of course we've got the golden calf, in a sense, that comes up, which is quite a significant part. And I'm going to try to draw a connection. I hope that it works. It may not. I know your friends, you'll let me know afterwards. But think back to when we here in Melbourne were in the midst of the biggest lockdown. And remember how quiet things were? If you had to travel, you were whether on the freeways or on Malvern Road or Glen Huntly Road, it was quiet. You just didn't, and this is even, when you weren't allowed out for more than an hour a day to exercise. It was eerily quiet. For many people say, well, it's kind of Armageddon-like. There's just that stillness, the quietness. Many of us would turn to one another through a Zoom meeting and say, is that a bird chirping? Because we hadn't stopped to actually hear the birds because the busyness of the traffic and of our lives were so stark. It's hard to believe that, in a sense, during the week, we celebrated the first year of the daily daven, being in, I think, Thursday, which was a Thursday, I think, was the first daily daven, the anniversary of our first daily daven. When we started to go into lockdown, we started to really consider, the things that were important to us. And it became clear that while community was important to us, our the people closest to us became even more important. These were the people that we got to, whether we liked it or not, spend significant time with. And of course, those people who live alone, they didn't have that. So they didn't have that other person in the house to have to talk to. And then, of course, we understood the importance of building community through the technology that we have through YouTube and through Facebook. And then we came out of lockdown. And we really are just a little bit more of a year from when we first went into that heavy lockdown. And we have an opportunity to ask ourselves a question as we've come out of the heaviness of lockdown, and we've been out of it for a while now. And I'm not talking about the recent 5-day lockdowns or all that. Do we have the opportunity to ask ourselves a question? And that question is, are we going to do things differently? And what do I mean by that? Are we going to do things differently to what we did beforehand? There's a rabbi in America, his name is Noah Farkas, and I'm going to present a concept to you that he presented in terms of isolation and even in terms of this parasha. Because what he's suggesting, and he tends to write from the psychological point of view, he's saying before we went into lockdown, we were already in isolation. What do you think he means by that? Before we went into lockdown, we as people, as individuals, were already in isolation. Sure, I'm happy to take an answer. It was a pregnant pause, but if you'd like to share, Joanne? That's absolutely right. And I think that he's suggesting that before we went into lockdown and that kind of isolation, we saw that, and we know this, for some of us we're good at it, for others that are not. I live in an apartment complex with 21 apartments. I don't know all my neighbors. I know some of them, and I never see my neighbors. And that was even before lockdown because our schedules were so different. We stopped talking to one another, meaningful conversations with neighbors, with people around us. If we went into a shop, it's always just to do business, to get done what we need to do. When we're at Kohl's or Woolies or any other store, did we actually mean it when we're at the checkout and say, well, how are you today? We just do, oh, here's, tap, and we don't even have to have that conversation. We just tap and go. If you've got that ability to do with your devices. And we know that when we stop talking when we start talking with one another, or we start using social media in a way that is destructive, we start to see the fraying of our social norms. Before the epidemic, before this pandemic forced us into isolation, the lockdown isolations, many of us were already struggling and felt that way with mental health. Crisis is exploding everywhere, especially amongst teens. And long before COVID started to infect cells and destroy bodies, our society, and this is what Noah Farkas, Rabbi Farkas, is trying to say, already had a fever with rising numbers of those who are impoverished, stressed, and degraded. So he's saying that we were already, our mental health, our physical health, was already being compromised before the pandemic through the stresses of life, through the stresses of society. Before we went into isolation, before we went into lockdown, we as individuals and part of community were feeling isolated. We're feeling empty and feeling fearful. You got a dog, and it made a difference for some. If you're allowed a dog, but not everybody can have dogs where they live for whatever reasons. So we've had times when we've been running away from people, And we ask ourselves, now that we're coming back and fully coming back, and I say we're still coming back because I don't think workforces in Melbourne are yet at 100% in terms of filling offices. What do we want to run, instead of running away, what do we want to run towards? And this is where I'm hopefully going to make the connection with the Torah portion. You've been waiting, like, when are we getting that? When are we getting to that? Think about it, thousands of years ago, the Torah knew of the dynamic and offered wisdom that we can always share with today. And in our parasha V'yakhel, Pekudei, Moses tries to model what it means to come back together. The reading opens, Moses assembled V'yakhel, all the community of Israel, and said to them, remember V'yakhel, embedded in the word V'yakhel is kahal, kahila. And so we are a Kehilat Kedusha, a holy community. And said, these are the things the Eternal commanded to you. And then what ends up happening is a specific commandment or specific commandments on how to build the tabernacle, God's home among the people. The sentiment seems to parallel earlier convocations, early commands to do things. So when the people rose and demanded that Aaron build what? A golden calf because of their distress, their upset, they said, the Torah says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, come, make us a god, small g God, who shall go before us, for that man Moses, interesting terminology, that man Moses, who brought us from Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. And at work in the Torah here, what seems to be is this interplay between two world views that bring people together to form different kinds of society. And I want to share this now from Noah Farkas and what he says, and to see where it leads us. In the story of the golden calf, the Israelites demanded that Aaron build for them the golden visage because they were afraid. Build us the golden calf, we're scared. To live in the society of the golden calf is to confuse substance with being substantial and crowds with community. It's where God is a mere thing to please your needs and you focus on only on receiving what you deserve. Idol worship, and listen to this phrase that he uses, idol worship turns religion into a crowd-funded museum piece, encased in gold, that is meant to be gawked at for a moment, only to go on your way to something else. So think about what you do when you go to a museum. You look, you might appreciate, you might criticize, you then move on to the next thing. A society with idols at its center expects others to create for you your own spirituality instead of you working hard to build it yourself. So when you build the golden calf, you think that's going to do it for you as opposed to on the inside. Idols create crowds, not communities. And to live in the world of a golden calf is to try to push ahead of others to get your moment with the things to observe it and ask of it to fulfill your needs. It is a society that fosters no bond between people and no expectations of ourselves and others, so that others then to live in our fear of each other and push against each other to get ahead. It is a society we ran away from in COVID and hopefully not one we want to return to. So COVID, ultimately, he says, it's given us the opportunity to really continue to build community through meaningful relationships if we're willing to take the time to focus on our own spiritual selves. The dynamic of the golden calf, as we know, still exists today. We see our cities getting noisier. We hear the birds less frequently. In fact, they were talking about, I think the birds are starting to leave the city again after they came in. And we have a choice. Are we going to be a gawker, or are we going to be the community-centered and community-minded Instead of living for ourselves, are we going to live for others? Instead of expecting our spirituality to be built for others, for other things, are we going to build our spirituality ourselves and take that time? Instead of observing the world, John, you'll like this one. Are we going to serve the world? I think we all like that. And instead of pushing our way through a crowd, are we going to be part of community building? And instead of asking about what you need, we ask how we are needed. And so in the sense of this Torah portion in Kahal, we build a home. We want to build a community, and we want to build a world where we're not running away, but we're running towards it. Shabbat Shalom. Did it work? I love that instant feedback. So let us now move into the Torah portion. I am reading Torah this morning from the first part of the Torah from Exodus chapter, not the first part of the Torah, I'm reading the first two aliyot. We're Exodus chapter 37, verse 17. I am struggling a little bit with my voice. Just seem to be losing it a little bit. It's a bit shaky. But as Joanne will attest, it's not an easy parasha to get your words around. So we're on page 673. And so we call to Torah all those who are celebrating birthdays at this time, and of course, those online. And I know that Sharon, you are celebrating a special birthday on Monday, is that correct?
Yes.
And of course, Izzy, your nephew, is turning 1.
He's turned 1.
He's turned 1. So if anybody else is celebrating a birthday who has celebrated a birthday this last week, and Jackie, it is your birthday tomorrow, so if you can please come up and represent your birthdays as well as others. Again, we're on page 673, Exodus chapter 37, verse 17, and I'll show you where we are reading from.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Jackie, you gotta look at the screen. People that are on social media would like to see you. You're not on the screen, so come on. Sharon, if you can hold the Torah open for me, please. Thank you. ויעש את המנורה זהב טהור מקשה, עשה את המנורה ירקה וקנה, גבעה, כפתריה ופרחיה ממנה, היו ושישה קנים יוצאים מצדי 3 קני מנורה, מצדי האחד ו3 קני מנורה, מצדי השני 3 גבעים, משוקדים בקנה האחד, כפתור ופרח, ו3 גבעים משקדים בקנה האחד כפתור ופרח, כן לששת הקנים היוצאים מן המנורה ובמנורה, 4 גבעים משוקדים, כפתוריה ופרחיה, וכפתור תחת 2 הקנים ממנה, וכפתור תחת 2 הקנים ממנה, וכפתור תחת 2 הקנים ממנה, לששת הקנים היוצאים ממנה, כפתוריהם וקנתם ממנה, היו כלי מקשה אחד זהב טהור, ויעש את נורתיה 7 מחלך, ומלקחיה ומחצתיה זהב טהור, כיכר זהב טהור, 10 ועם כל כליה.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the God of our ancestors bless you, Sharon and Jackie, as you stand here celebrating special birthdays. Sharon, can I share with everybody? Would you like to share?
Why not? Why not? I'm turning 30 on Monday.
Mazel tov. Jackie, would you like to share? You don't have to. 51. Mazel tov on celebrating these birthdays, and mazel tov for Izzy for turning 1. I know the early part of his life was quite difficult, and I know that he's going from strength to strength, and to celebrate the birthday has been beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. We also wish mazel tov to Paul Brand, Paul Bridgman, Felicity Fast, Danny Gorog, Patty Keith, Noah Kino, Lou Peichel, and Raf Roseback, who are also celebrating birthdays this Shabbat. May you go from strength to strength and be able to celebrate your birthdays with friends, with family, out of isolation, building community, and we say Amen and Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
And so for our next Aliyah, we're going to continue with the same section of Torah from Exodus, from Shmot. We're going to continue with chapter 37, verse 25. And the next Aliyah is reserved for those who are celebrating an anniversary, a wedding anniversary, a commitment anniversary. It doesn't just have to be weddings. And so in honor of Andrew and Kath Kolb, Danny and Vicky Lustig, John and Margot Rogers, David and Sevda Simmelman, and Mike and Jane Starr, who are celebrating anniversaries at this time. Anybody celebrating an anniversary who would like to come up here in the congregation? Joanne, if I could ask you to represent the community with this Aliyah. Thank you. Again, we're on chapter 37. Oh, yes. Baruch Adonai Barach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'cha banu mikol ha'amim, v'natat lanu et Torto. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. You can hold the Torah. V'yaset hamizbeach haktoret atzei shitim ama arko ve'ama rachbo ravua v'amatayim kamator mimenu hayu karnatav v'yitzaf et zahav tahor et gago ve'et kariotav saviv et karnotav v'yas lo zar zahav saviv v'shtei tivat zahav aseh lo mitachat lizar'o al shetei zelatav al shnei zadiv levatayim levadim leseit oto bahem v'yaz et havadim atzei shitim v'yatzof otam zahav v'yaz et shemen hamishcha kodesh ve'et katoret hasamim tahor ma'aseh rokeach.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the God of our ancestors bless you, Joanne, as you stand here to represent those who are celebrating anniversaries. You've been able to represent people quite often.
It's been a
So
celebratory year.
hopefully all of those people who have the blessing for their anniversary, all of their joys will filter through down to you and David to make your anniversaries and to make each day that you spend together even more joyous.
Feel very blessed.
And to those who are celebrating anniversaries, may you all go from strength to strength, enjoying family and friends as you celebrate. And with God's blessing, we say Amen and Mazel Tov. And Mazel Tov to you, Joanne, by default. Friends, we now rise for Hagba. Joanne, don't go anywhere. Hagba and Galila. What about... Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. as we are risen for Hagbah and Galilah.
וזאת התורה ששם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה ששם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה ששם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה.
So our Torah reading now continues with Genesis chapter 1, at the very beginning, verse 14. It's on page 19 of the Chumash, so you go back to the very beginning. So if you ever, this is a lovely way to remember in the Chumash when the beginning of the Torah begins, because it begins on page 18, which is life. How cool is that? And so for our next Aliyah, Ruja will be learning for us from this scroll, which is a very difficult scroll to read from. And so we call to Torah all those who are remembering a loved one at the moment, whether Shiva, Shloshim, for Yartzeit. Page 19. It's the fourth day of creation we're reading. Yes. Adonai hamvarach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvarach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. Baruch atah Adonai נותן התורה.
Can you hold the Torah open for Ruja? Thank you very much. You've got it.
ויאמר אלוהים יהי מאורות ברקיע השמיים להבדיל בין היום ובין הלילה, והיו לאותות ולמועדים ולימים ושנים, והיו למאורות ברקיע השמיים להאיר על הארץ, ויהי כן. ויעש אלוהים את שני המאורות הגדולים, את המאור הגדול לממשלת היום, ואת המאור הקטון לממשלת הלילה, ואת הכוכבים. ויתן אותם אלוהים ברקיע השמיים להאיר על הארץ, ולמשול ביום ובלילה, ולהבדיל בין האור ובין החושך. וירא אלוהים כי טוב. Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker, Yom Revi'i.
Koyach. Beautiful. And the blessing after.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam v'nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Mishaberach Avotenu v'Ham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the God of our ancestors bless you, Sandra and Dorothy, as you stand here to remember loved ones who are so close to you. For Sandra, it's so raw. Just a couple of days ago, you lost your brother Alan in the United Kingdom, and know that we are your family here to support and to love you. And Dorothy, you've brought the yahrzeit of your parents forward a week to remember, because you knew you were going to be able to be in shul. And even though your loss is a little bit longer than Sandra's, that's still felt, and you support one another and standing together as mourners. As we also think of the Applebaum and the Barnes and the Borovic and Chaitman families, to the cousins, the Davis, the Ephron, the Isinger, Philip, and families, to my families, also remembering at this time the Fast, the Frey, the Gaster, the Golden, Graf, Hegedus, Handel, Hertzfeld, Laster, Marx, Meschenberg, Opet, Pekarski, Rosenfeld families, to the Same and the Samuels, the Sander, the Shaws, the Temin, Valentine, Vati, Virtwitz, and Wolf families. If you're joining us, this blessing is for you, as we wish all of you, and especially that you stand here and with your recent loss, Sandra, our hearts are with you, and we wish you not just a long life, but a life of meaning and comfort and of family. And we say, Amen. Amen. And so, still in the presence of Torah, we think of those who are in need of healing of body, healing of mind, and healing of soul. And as we turn to page 371 for the Mishaberach Lecholim, the blessing for healing.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
The blessing for healing continues for Bet Pulver, Gail Prince, Jack Easter, Helen Strangos, Afida bin Samaya, Glynis Perry, Percy Perskina, Vicky Caffin, Shimon Label ben Hannah Rochel, Richard Rosen in Sydney, Andrew Flood, David Arthur, David Friedman, Shoshana Bat Hinchas, Velana, John Whitholtz, Racheli Paz, Alan Benjamin Morgan, Bronwyn Van Dam, Adira Bat Rachel Bat Avraham Vasara, Fred Seligman, Yeshayahu Gershon, Gabriel Ben Ilana Esther, Francis Zucker, Patty Waller, Caroline Hurd, Robert Stanley, and Maimuna Abrams. If you'd like to mention the name of healing, I invite you to share their names out loud or in your hearts or on the social messaging. And as the blessing continues.
Mishaberach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Rofei Tacholim. Blessed is God who brings healing to those who are unwell, and comfort and strength to their caregivers, and we say Amen. We rise once more for Hagba and Lila.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה.
And so Peter's going to share with us the Haftarah, which is for Shabbat HaChodesh. You can find it in the Chumash on page 1653. Peter's going to share a slightly different translation. He's sharing it from the updated Plaut's commentary, as opposed to the older version. So the English is I find the English a little bit easier. So that's the version you're reading. And of course, as I mentioned, it's from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 45.
Thank you, Rabbi. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנביאים טובים ורצה בדבריהם ונאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בתורה ובמשה אבתו ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק. אמן. All the people of the land must join the Prince of Israel in making this contribution. Then the prince's obligation for the whole burnt offering and the meal and the drink offerings on festivals, on new moons and on Shabbat, on all the appointed festivals of the house of Israel will be this. He must prepare the sin offering, the meal offering, the whole burnt offering, the offerings of well-being, to make atonement for the house of Israel. Thus says the eternal God, on the first day of the first month, take a young bull of the herd without blemish and purify the sanctuary. Let the priest take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the temple, on the four corners of the altar's base, and on the posts of the gate of the inner court. On the seventh day of the month, do the same thing for those who have sinned accidentally or through inexperience. Thus you shall wipe the temple clean. The 14th day of the first month shall be your Passover. And during the 7-day festival, unleavened bread shall be eaten. On that day, let the prince provide a bull as a sin offering for himself and for all the common people. Let him present a whole burnt offering to the Eternal. Each of the 7 days of the festival, consisting of the 7 bulls and the 7 rams without blemish, and a goat each day as a sin offering. For each bull and each ram, let him also provide an offering of an ephah of grain and a hin of oil. He must do the same thing on the festival beginning on the 15th day of the 7th month, providing the same sin offering, whole burnt offering, meal offering, and oil for 7 days. Amen. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, זו כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, ואומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שבכל דבריו אמת וצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום שבת הזה. שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמלוכה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה, אדוני, מקדש השבת.
And Yoshikawa, thank you so much, Peter. It's good to have you on the beamer again. It said it's good to have you on the beamer again to share the blessings. Friends, we rise now for the blessing of the new month, as well as the prayer for Israel and the prayer for country. So the blessing for new month is on page 378. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu. שתחדש עלינו את החודש הזה, הבא, לטובה ולברכה, ותיתן לנו חיים ארוכים, חיים של שלום, חיים של פרנסה, חיים שתהא בנו אהבת תורה ויראת שמיים, חיים שימלאו משאלות ליבנו לטובה, אמן. מי שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, וגאל אותם מעבדות לחירות, הוא יגאל אותנו בקרוב, חברים כל ישראל, ונאמר אמן. ראש חודש ניסן יהיה ביום ראשון מחר. הבא עלינו ועל כל ישראל לטובה. The new month of Nisan will begin on Sunday, tomorrow, Sunday night. הבא עלינו ועל כל ישראל לטובה. And it may be good for the entire world and not just the Jewish people. Yachadsheu HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleinu v'al kol amo beit Yisrael, l'chaim u'l'shalom, l'sason u'simcha, l'yishuel nechama v'nomar. Amen. May it be the will of the Holy One ever to be praised, that it bring for us and the whole house of Israel life and peace, happiness and joy, deliverance and consolation. And we say, Amen. And the prayer for country on page 376. Ellen?
O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Help us remember those who lived in this land before us, and those who have made it their home in more recent times. Teach us to give thanks for what we have, by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation, and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honour those who have died in the defence of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen.
Amen. And on the facing page, the prayer for Israel.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shielded beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen.
Amen. And remain standing as we return the Torah to the Ark on page 374.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו. הודו על ארץ בשמיים, וירם קרן גמו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרובו. הללויה, הללויה, כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו. אפרים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכיך מהושע, דרכיך דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך, ונשובה. חדש ימינו כקדם, חדש ימינו כקדם.
We continue with Aleinu on page 586.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשחרים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
Of course, remain standing as we turn to Kaddish Tom on page 598. And we think of at this time, and our hearts go out to those who have lost loved ones recently, and the names I'll share with you are yet to be laid to rest. And so we think of and send our love to you, Sandra, as you remember your brother, Alan Levine. Also, we think of the family of John Michaels, Esther Horsey, and Fred Trim. And for the Shloshim, we remember Peter Prunster and Brian Rosehill. And for the yard sites, we remember Ariane Giselle Appleboom, Fred Berman, Leon Birnbaum, Gerda Burstone, Bella Chamilios, Sala Cousins, Marie Davis, Matrona Dimitropoulos, Bertram Ettlinger, Simon Fast, Siegfried Gaster, Olga Geiger, Jack Golden, Yosky Goldman, Mary Graf, Werner Graf, George Guterman, Alexander Hegedus, Anna Hendel, Katerina Holek, Ada Jacobi, Ina Kurtzer, Eva Laster, Jeffrey Opat, Joseph Penner, Werner Phillip, Molly Rockman, Malvin Salve, Leah Esther Slonim, Alan Tamman, Joseph Turtz, Paul Vati, and Pavel Zelicki. If you'd like to remember the name of a loved one for Shiva, Shloshim, or Yahrzeit, please do share their names out loud or share them with us through social messaging.
שמעון בן מויה.
Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of the righteous be for a blessing as we join together with Kaddish Yatom. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, ve'almad divrach yiriteh v'yamlich malchuteh, chayachon av yom echon, uv'chayeda chol Beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman kariv v'marur, amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach l'olam l'amei almaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתדע ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריך הוא לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא וימרור אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. המקום ינחם אתכם בתוך שעה הבלי ציון וירושלים. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved in Zion and Jerusalem and around the world, and we say Amen. So Joanne, Loi's Vice President, will share some announcements.
Shabbat Shalom. How wonderful to be back in the sanctuary again for services. I keep saying this week after week, and I'm still so pleased to be present here. Congratulations to all those celebrating birthdays and anniversaries, and for those who are joining us to remember a loved one. We hope you have found comfort today in our services and with your community. A few Pesach announcements. Tonight it will be 2 weeks until Pesach. I haven't started my shopping. I'm getting a bit anxious about it now. So Mazon Australia, as you know, is a not-for-profit company established 31 years ago as a Jewish response to hunger. We are holding our Pesach appeal. It's a Kitniyot appeal. Please bring your canned goods into TBI if you can. If you can't, David Southwick MP has kindly offered his office as a drop-off point. Please make sure your goods are within the expiry date, better still a very long shelf life, and only unopened goods. Matzah ball, matzah knedler making with Next Door. It's for everyone on Sunday the 21st of March at 5:30. This is a Zoom event and they will teach you how to make matzah knedler, matzah balls in your own home. Our chocolate Seder for all families and individuals is on Tuesday the 23rd of March. That is a highlight for many in our community. Bubs and Tots. Oh, not Bubs and Bagels. Bubs and Tots. Bubs and Tots matzah bake will be on our premises on Friday the 26th of March, and we will be holding a second night Seder for the community, and that will be Sunday the 28th of March. You don't have to have memorised everything I've just said. It is all on our website and in the Rabbi's weekly email. Thank you to Ruja for laning and also for Rabbi as well. Thank you, and to all those who participated in the service. Thank you to Jackie for acting as our shamas. When you leave, please thank CSG, who are outside keeping us safe in here. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Joanne. And if I could ask everybody to please rise for Kiddush and for Motzi. There is grape juice and wine at the back, and there's pre-cut challah at the back, so please do go ahead and help yourselves.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם בריתו גם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי Shabbat vayinafash.
Okay, Merach Adonai Yom HaShabbat Vayakadashehu, and God sanctified the Shabbat and called it a delight.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
L'chaim. And let's continue with the Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. Amen.
Amen. B'te'avon. And Sharon, you'll take us out with Yom Zeh?
Yeah.
Yisrael.
Yes. יום זה לישראל, אורה ושמחה, שבת מנוחה, שבת מנוחה. יום זה לישראל, אורה ושמחה, שבת מנוחה, שבת מנוחה. ציווית פיקודים במעמד סיני, שבת ומועדים, לשמות בכל שני, לערוך איבה